Hey guys, welcome back to more neighbor stories. In this video, a neighbor idiot lawyer demands I move out of my own house because his son wants my home for his birthday. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is an amazing story about an incredibly fraudulent lawyer. It is titled, I bought 5 classic cars cheap from the widow of a deceased collector. The widow has died and now the grandson has threatened to sue as he wanted the cars. The grandson is supposedly a lawyer. So I'm close friends with the coworker and we have helped his mother in her 80s with the house maintenance. His mother's neighbor, I will call her Elaine, was in her 90s in 2016 when Elaine's husband, who was in a home, died. While doing maintenance on my coworker's mother's house, I drove there in my 1975 Falcon and Elaine came out to ask me to have a look at some cars that I might like that had belonged to her husband. I won't go into detail except 3 were in good drivable condition and worth a decent figure, but 2 more were just good for car parts. At the time, I could not afford anywhere near what they were genuinely worth. 2 are at least in the top 5 desirable Australian classics, and I told her what they could fetch on the open market, but she was happy to take $5,000 for all 5 cars, well under their value. She wanted to make sure they went to someone who would appreciate them, and I paid for and collected them a week later, and I still have the 3 good ones, 2 now on historic registration and the other in storage. Elaine passed away in the middle of this year and her grandson is now on the warpath over these cars. He found my contact details and phoned me several times threatening to sue me for effectively stealing the cars from his grandma and has turned up at my front door once demanding the return of these cars. I've not been served or received anything in writing from him in a legal sense, only his business card, which sounds dodgy. I have verified he is an actual lawyer as he claims through a website of his employer which lists him with a photo as specializing in commercial and insurance law just like his business card says. I would have expected if there was a real legal issue with the ownership of the cars, it would be in relation to the grandmother's estate proceedings and I would be contacted by mail by someone acting as executor or something and not via phone calls and doorstop visits by one angry smug idiot acting like it's happening between me and him alone. Since I'm not a lawyer and my presumptions could be completely out, I'm posting here, if need be I could now afford the market price of all these cars. Is the grandson likely to have a case and should I find a lawyer of my own? Update, my coworker's mother is still in contact with Elaine's son and daughter as they own and still work on Elaine's old house next door. She put them in contact with me. They wanted to know who it was who was actually threatening what about the cars as Elaine has no grandsons and we spoke. They identified the lawyer grandson as an old ex. He was once a partner of, but not married to one of Elaine's granddaughters for a few years and he is also known to be in a lot of debt, which might explain desperate hunting for valuable items. Elaine's son and daughter reiterated that their dad had left instructions to Elaine for the cars to go to someone who would cherish them and they were happy they did, and glad to hear from me that they are still being looked after together. I have not contacted the faux grandson's law firm yet. And by the way, I got a lot of evidence of his misrepresentations to me, and after googling NSW law, I'm not 100% sure of the legality of all of it, especially about sharing my home security and dashcam recordings directly to the other firm or even speaking directly to them. I will go through my own legal representation there as a filter on what I need to give them to make sure they know of his behavior linked to their firm. Small update, fake grandson came around twice more. I now have multiple records of him visiting my residence, threats via text and many phone calls to me after I asked him to not contact me again except in writing. Complaints have been made through my lawyer to his firm and relevant regulatory bodies. I informed him of the complaints on Thursday and reiterated not to contact me again, and I have not heard a peep from him since. Update to the story, fake grandson had already been dismissed from the firm before my lawyer and I complained and he already has complaints against him for other reasons. So yeah guys, there were no further updates and it seems that's how the story ended. Truth be told, never trust a fake grandson lawyer. I'm glad that OP came out ahead. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So first, a bit of backstory. I come from a relatively well-off family who has lived in a wealthy part of Nigeria all my life. Both of my parents were supportive of me, and so I wanted to make them proud on my own. Not just make it because I had access to their money. Since I was 14, I've been working outside of being a student. I graduated and instantly got to work on my degree. Eventually, I found a good job, and after lots of late nights and long work days, I finally had enough to buy my own house. Everything I'd ever worked for went into buying that house, and I was instantly gonna make it my home. It is 2 stories tall and parked on a huge lot where there are already plenty of fully grown trees that I get to wake up to every morning. The whole yard is always teeming with life, and the house has had minimal issues since I moved in, so the relaxation I feel at home is sometimes overwhelming. Don't think for a second that I'm not grateful for the life I've been given. There are so many advantages I had to get to where I am, but at the same time I was not lazy and I did not cut any corners. Like I said, I bought this house by putting myself through school and working hard and getting lucky with the market at the time. I'm well aware of how terrible it is now. I don't think it's fair to myself to think that I have not earned what I've gotten though. With that out of the way, let me introduce you to a man that we will call Steven, because I don't want him to try and make a fuss if he finds this post. Steven is a lawyer who is also my next door neighbor. I have known him for the 1.5 years that I've lived here, and that whole time I did not really think of him as anything but my neighbor. We've had small talk, sure, but I never really knew anything about the kind of person that he would turn out to be by the time I met his son. From the small pieces of information I've learned over the course of living here, Steven's son, who we will call Steven Jr., is a mixed bag of a person. When I first moved in, he was finishing up his 3rd year of high school. I know this because there was the biggest graduation party for a student moving between their 3rd and 4th year of high school. There were dozens of guests, music, dancing, the whole deal, and it went on for what felt like a whole day. I don't even think that Steve Jr. was at the top of his class or anything. He was just a normal kid doing exactly what everyone else his age was doing, but his dad refused to let his son feel normal, I guess. That is all to say that every time I've met him since moving in, he's become more and more of a spoiled man. He is 18 now, and God only knows how many times I've heard that by the time I started writing this. Well, why is this important, you ask? Well, he is a man now. Clearly, he deserves the life ahead of him, and nothing is gonna stop him. That was the introductory paragraph that he gave me when he first knocked on my door. When I answered and saw Steve Jr., I would have bet money that he was there for some kind of heads up about his next graduation party. If his junior party was that big, could you imagine the real one? He ended up having it somewhere else, but that's beside the point. Instead of that though, he tried to stand up to me and talk to me like a pyramid scheme salesman. Every word was confident, but it was clear he had no idea what he was actually talking about. I awkwardly congratulated him on graduating and wished him well on whatever he chose to do next, and as he told me, he had it all figured out already. He was in a new relationship with a girl from his school, had a set-up internship thanks to his dad's position as a lawyer, which he weirdly brought up twice, and was going to be a homeowner before he was even 20. With the full context missing, I thought this was just some weird attempt to make me feel worse about my situation or something like that. It did not work, but it did make me want to stop talking. Out of nowhere, he asked how I felt about my house. Immediately, I felt a bit isolated. Something about the way he said it felt like a threat. I said it was a nice house and I was planning on staying in it for a while, since I had just moved in and was finding my way through life right now, and he just laughed. He said that a guy like me should not be living in a house like mine unless he had the financial safety to maintain it. Just wanting to end the conversation, I told him that I had plenty of money put aside for the house payments, and I was perfectly happy with my home, and that I was not sure why he was actually asking me that. He said he wanted to buy my house. Again, this kid and I have talked maybe 3 times before this point, and none of them were meaningful. He was literally 18 and now felt the need to ask me for my house. The house that I had just moved into? I could tell he was not joking, but I stupidly let him keep talking. He told me the house perfectly suited what he needed for his new life and that he and his dad had actually thought it all out. They had apparently been planning this for a while, and it was my responsibility to sell them the house for whatever price they picked. Now, to be fair, they assumed I was not gonna sell unless it was for a crazy amount, and that amount ended up being an extra 50k than what I bought it for. Knowing their family, that felt like petty cash. I actually felt a bit ticked off that they were openly describing me as a pawn in their game, and it felt so good to finally have a bit of power to shut them down. I explained that while I hoped he would find a new home, this house was actually occupied and I had no intention of moving. I told him about the renovations and how I'd only been here for just over a year, so it did not make sense for me to move, especially with how hard I worked to get into this neighborhood. I also told him that if he had this much money put aside for a house, he would easily be able to find another one just like, if not better than mine. The whole time he was looking at me like he was about to knife me or something. It's an expression that forms so quickly on spoiled brats like him. I hate to say it, but it was satisfying to watch his pride fall off his face. Without another word, I thanked him for stopping by and then closed the door. Did I think that would be the end of it? Well, I can dream, can't I? They got their answer, and there was no way they did not have a backup plan for this. If a lawyer of Steven's status could not find some other place for his son, who is not even old enough to drink, then he can just stay at his house like most other 18-year-olds. It's not like that house was cramped either, but about an hour later I got another knock at my door. I expected to see Steve Jr. again, but instead it was Steven, and he looked pissed. I asked if something was wrong, and he asked why I had been so rude to his entrepreneur son that was trying to start a life. Confused, I explained what happened and that I was never rude to him at any point. I just told him that I was not selling my house. What happened next is still burned into my brain. He pointed a finger in my face and said that I was a disgrace to the kind of people who lived here and demanded I move out or he would drop the extra money they were planning on giving me and would just have me forcefully removed. After a long pause of trying to process all that, I stood up to him and told him that if I did not give him consent, he could never buy the house from me. He started yelling about how he was not a lawyer to be messed with and that he could ruin my life if I let this get to court, which he was willing to do. After a few more minutes of verbal garbage about how my house was his and that I was making a huge mistake, he closed my door for me and walked home. After a couple of confusing days, I was notified about what he did. He had filed a lawsuit against me for refusing to sell my house. For a minute, as I was looking over all the documents he had sent explaining his case, I felt like I was just going to have a panic attack. It felt like there were hundreds of pages of just absolute garbage that he was using to try and take my home away from me. He tried talking about how I was suspicious, that I had mistreated his family, that I had agreed to sell the house and was now just trying to back out of it for more money, just anything he could really throw at me. And by the way, obviously I'm not a lawyer, so some of the things he was bringing up made absolutely no sense to me, but I had a feeling it didn't make sense to anyone else either. Immediately, I decided to consult a legal expert who had once worked with my dad. He explained everything to me in a couple of phone calls, and I sent him everything I had. The advisor helped me calm down and explained everything I could do, but most importantly, I should never try to reason with someone like Steven. If I did, he would eventually find a way to get through to me and I could lose my home. I was advised to find everything I could about him, and so the next day I took off work to do just that. It was not hard to find Steven's profile online. Everywhere he painted himself as a model citizen, especially when it came to how much he respected the law and would do anything to bring people to justice. Ironic, isn't it? And since he was a lawyer, I could also do a bit of digging into what kind of cases he usually worked on. There was not a whole lot of footage or anything, but it seemed to me that he had a habit of getting super emotional when explaining his client's case. All of them seem to be at his status as well. I'm not sure how, but he has won the vast majority of his cases, and in any case, I documented every time he was involved with a case like mine and wrote down all the points he used against his opponent. My advisor was the nicest guy I ever met, and with my help we formed a case to expose Steven's unlawful practices and hopefully get him out of my life. Some of the evidence came from the threat he made to me when he was at my door, so it wasn't anything I could prove, but hopefully he would eventually crack and it could be used because it was the biggest thing I could have against him. Steven was smart though. I knew how much I could be at risk if his lawsuit won. So I filed the counter lawsuit explaining in detail about my official declaration that the house was mine, and since no one else could speak for me, I was the one who decided what would happen to it. My advisor made sure all the evidence showing Steven's track record of abusing his power, including a couple of people from his past cases, we were able to get a statement from, and we made sure that there were no gaps in our logic. The law said the house was mine, and that was all that mattered. To make it easier, I didn't even ask for money from him. I was just gonna file the suit to get him away from me. If he wanted to take the easy way out and just accept defeat, the option would be there for him. So yes, we went to court soon thereafter. Steven made his case and even used his son as a witness. He talked about all the good he had done for the community and how my counter lawsuit was just my way of trying to get out of the responsibility that I had supposedly promised to his son. Luckily, I was allowed to speak too. I told him every legal term I'd learned, especially when it came to the process of selling a house, and that I'd never promised anything, let alone document that I wanted to sell the house. The court listened as I explained how Steven was abusing his power as a lawyer and that he needed to be stopped. Before I knew it, the decision had been made. The court had looked over both cases, and after a bit of discussion and letting us both speak out in private, a judge finally spoke to me. He explained how in no way did Steven have the power to strip me of my home. Regardless of his status, the house would be mine and his lawsuit would be dismissed. Mine, however, would be pursued and I would be awarded the damages that they believed I was owed from Steven. Steven was in the room when this happened and it was nothing but pure rage in his eyes as I smiled at him. Luckily, he was smart enough to not fight back. They explained to us that Steven's position was suspended until the investigation was concluded, and that meant I was free from anything he tried to push on me. He did not try and contact me, he knew better now, and I did not even see Steve Jr., who was probably already moved on to his next obsession. I would not be surprised if he had found another house already, but I really did not care about him. After his case was dismissed, I reported Steven to the Bar Association. The court could only do so much with this case, but I needed to make sure he was not just going to do this to another neighbor of mine. I actually explained everything about the case, his son's wish for my house, just everything. Steven never stopped me as I kept this a secret, but after he figured out he was being investigated, I stayed inside my locked house. While the investigation was going on, I was contacted a few more times to answer some questions. I was glad this was being taken seriously, but at the same time I felt like this had been going on forever and I just wanted it to be over with. Steven Jr. called me once after that. I don't know where he got my number, but I answered. He talked about how much of a strain on his family's life I was and how I needed to be more grateful for what I had been offered. He explained how he was struggling to even find a house now, since the only one he wanted was mine, and now that his father was suspended, he did not even have the same amount of money to spend. And of course, I just hung up. I really appreciated though how the Bar Association handled it. They called me twice to assure me that me and my home were secure and that there was no reason for me to contact Steven or his son. I asked what happened to him, and they actually told me that Steven had been terminated from his position and could no longer practice law. I'm a grown man, but I wanted to squeal. They told me they couldn't tell me everything for legal reasons, but what mattered is that I was safe and Steven was no longer going to abuse the law. That was all I needed to hear, really. Those damages, if I'm being honest, were more than I deserved for the event. It was not life-changing, but it also was pretty inconvenient. I'm glad I stuck with my gut though. Let's just say I don't care about that extra 50k anymore after the payout. If you're a good lawyer, I appreciate you, but if you relate to Steven, please kindly quit your job for the sake of everyone. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So I am a lawyer. Why is this important? Well, it's the sole reason that I've been able to live in luxury for the past couple years. It's also the reason lots of my family members decided to get into contact with me again after literal years of not speaking. For some background, I have 3 sisters and I'm the only brother and also the eldest. 2 of my sisters are my dad's, but the youngest is the baby my mom and stepdad had. My parents put most of their attention onto my sister, specifically the youngest, and all but forced me to help out around the house as if I were a third parent. They were not abusive or anything like that, but all of the pocket money would go to my sisters, birthday money to me from aunts and uncles would also go to them, nights out would have to be cancelled on the day because my parents needed an extra pair of hands to make dinner or something like that. It got tiring very quickly, so I became a bit of a handful once I got a bit older. I did not really respect them. I did not think any of it was fair, something I still stand to. To be honest, I won't get into it in this, but on my 18th birthday, my parents kicked me out. It was not because they thought that I was a troubled kid or anything, it was all because, you're 18 now, we cannot keep buying you food and paying for the gas and electricity you use. And it's Christmas next week, we need money for presents for your sister. I asked what they expected me to do, where they thought I would live, how I would buy food, etc. They just kept repeating their same points and that I was an adult now and had to figure it out. I called them all names under the sun, cussing them and my sisters out, storming out of the house and not looking back. My phone blew up with angry messages from my parents, sisters and other distant relatives. Long story short, my parents had twisted the story to make it seem like I just cussed them out, broke some dishes and then left. They did not say they kicked me out, but I did not care. I will make this short, but after that, I had a very tough year. I was homeless and had never had a job. I managed to get into a homeless shelter and picked up some odd jobs here and there, but eventually I got the opportunity to apply to a law school and took it. I'd always done good in school, so I figured I had a good shot. I got a place there and also got some pretty good student finances. Flash forward 3 years and I graduate and get a job. So here I am today, another 3 years later with a gorgeous home, lots of spare change and a wonderful girlfriend whom I'm hope to make my wife, fingers crossed. In those 6 years, the only messages I got from any of my family were more badgering that I needed to apologize, and that was mostly at the start. The past 4 to 5 years have been radio silent. Now then, last month, the first text message I'd gotten from my mother since the controversy. Your sister is getting married. I know we had issues, but I think it's time we should all heal and come together. Come to the wedding. We are all sorry, son. I won't lie and say that I didn't turn into a crying baby after reading that. Everyone wants a mother who will love them. I figured I would go and replied back saying so. And by the way, ripe stars, I'm not sure I would have had the same thought process as OP here. Let me know in the comments if you would have had the same thoughts. Anyway, at this point I also wondered if the real reason for inviting me was for my money, but then I remembered there was no way they would know about my success, or so I thought. And for your information, the wedding was for the youngest who had just turned 19, which I think is too young, but anyway, the wedding was 1 week ago, so it was 3 weeks after the text message. It was awkward, but my family seemed friendly enough. My distant relatives were less so, but that is not shocking considering what version of the story they got. As the night was winding to an end, I soon found out why they had brought me here. Zach, we did have something we wanted to speak to you about, my new brother-in-law said to me after we'd been drinking and talking for a little while. Yeah, what is it? I asked. Well, my sister, your sister-in-law, is planning to go away for a few months. Your family have already said that they spoke with you about this, so really what I'm asking is, can we have the payment? Huh? I asked very confused. For her trip, he continued. My trip, you said you would cover it. Said sister-in-law was sat near us and must have been listening in. Bear in mind, this is the first time I've met these people, and this was how righteous they were already acting. Sorry, but I never said that. I was too stunned to know what was going on. What? She started going a bit red. My parents came over. What's going on here? They asked. You said he would pay for my trip, my sister-in-law wailed. Yes, we did. Come on, son, you can afford it, my stepdad spoke up. Why is this the first time I'm hearing about all of this? Why on earth do you think that after 6 years of not speaking to me, I would just pay for my sister's husband's sister's holiday? This must be some sort of joke, right? Son, don't be so selfish. We all know you make good money, my mother said with a little laugh. How would you know that? Wait, is this why you invited me? Just to get money out of me? We saw on your employer's website that you work there and what your salary is. You can spare $70,000. $70,000? You thought I was gonna just hand over 70K after the way you treated me? I was standing at this point glaring at my parents. Brother, listen to me, my sister-in-law whined, pouting her lips. I am pregnant, okay, and I really need this trip for my mental health. This is insane, I half whispered to myself. I thought I must be dreaming. You're really not gonna pay up for it? If not for her, do it for us. My youngest sister spoke up, coming out of nowhere. For you? What have you ever done for me though? Other than sit idly by as mom and dad kicked me out at 18 with nothing to my name and only the clothes on my back. By this point the room was silent and I could see my relatives looking confused. You were not kicked out, you left, my aunt spoke up. No, I was kicked out. Tell them, mom. Well, okay, I guess technically he was kicked out. But look, we needed money for his sister's Christmas gifts and that's the only way we thought to save some. My mom replied, glancing around at everyone who was staring at her with anger on their faces. Everyone started talking at once, calling her a whole list of horrible names, and that is when my sister-in-law interrupted. Guys, this won't solve anything. I still need to get him to pay for my holiday. Everyone went silent again, wondering how on earth someone could have such audacity to think that was important right now, after what just spilled out. I did not say anything, turning and leaving. I went and sat outside, letting a few tears slip out. Some of my relatives came out, apologizing profusely, and some were even crying themselves. My sister-in-law came out next, sitting down beside me and handing me a beer. Sorry about all that, brother. I went too far. That was all she said before she hugged me a little too long and then left. After I had headed home, I figured out exactly why that hug was suspiciously long when I received a notification on my banking app that $70,000 had been taken out of my account in multiple separate transactions. I was stunned and suddenly started feeling around for my wallet. It was missing. My sister-in-law had stolen it. I raced back over to where the wedding was, knowing the festivities would still be going on. "What have you done?" I all but yelled in my sister-in-law's ear once I found her in the corner of the dance floor. She looked up at me with beady eyes and ran. I chased her, and suddenly a horde of people were running after us to see what was going on. "It's not fair, you have so much money. I'm pregnant, I deserve this holiday," my sister-in-law ranted once she stopped running and turned around to me. "I'm gonna charge back all of those charges and I will report you, and don't you ever—" I stopped mid-sentence by a ferocious slap across my face. After that she made another attempt to slap me, but someone stepped in and stopped her. "Get off me, I'm pregnant!" I called the cops and they were here in minutes. I said, "This woman has stolen my wallet and taken $70,000 out of my bank account, and she has now assaulted me," I told the police. They took statements from those around us. Nobody was siding with her. I was ecstatic to take her to court. They also forced her to hand over my wallet, proof that she had taken it in the first place. Court happened to be some time later. As a lawyer, I represented myself. I knew it would be an easy win, but I wanted to give my family the humiliation. And of course I was right. I won the case and she ended up behind bars for stealing from me, identity theft, and then even assault. I could not charge back the funds because of this. I won $70,000 from her. She left that courthouse kicking and screaming, and my parents also had to be dragged out as they started cussing me out and saying how much of a terrible person I was. I spent a couple grand of that changing the names of her holiday, and then me and my wife went away and had a wonderful time. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/petty revenge. It is titled, "Okay Dan, you wanna give my number out to strangers? Here you go." So I got a really memorable phone number, like 123456 level distinct, so people often think that I'm making it up when I give it out. For years now, some businessman named Dan, I will leave out his last name, has been giving out my number to clients or people he does not want to deal with just to brush them off. I've usually been polite when these people call, just letting them know that they have the wrong number. Over time, I've picked up a surprising amount of info about Dan just by talking to the caller, like his full name, job title, the company he works for. He is actually very real. I never wanted to get involved or reach out to him directly though. However, after years of this nonsense, I've had enough. Lately, when someone calls asking for Dan, I tell them that he moved to Arizona because of some legal issues and embezzlement. And if they ask if there's a new contact at the company, I just say the whole operation is under investigation. I really hope this rumor makes its way back to him, because Dan, just stop giving out my number. Seriously. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like the video and I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much.